All right. So when people are going through a divorce, they have assets. Assets are anything from the home, financial accounts, pensions, and then there's something called a QDRO. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm having this podcast with my guests, and I know nothing about QDROs, and it's QDRO. If you've ever seen it, that is what a QDRO is. And I'm going to introduce my guest and then let him explain. We want to dedicate this podcast for people who have been hearing the term QDRO in their divorce, who don't understand what it is, how it works, how it gets divided. So, my guest is Wade Griffin. Wade is a divorce attorney for Varghese, Somerset. Wade has been a divorce attorney for 25 years. He handles complex, high conflict, high net worth cases, very experienced. And hi, Wade. Thanks for doing this.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, I was being honest when I said I have no idea what a QDRO is. For the first question I have is, what does QDRO stand for? And then what is it?
So QDRO is spelled, it's all caps, and it's just an acronym. It's QDRO, which stands for Qualified Domestic Relations Order. And so we just call it QDRO or QDROs for short. And they are used to divide retirement plans. So, for example, in a divorce, if someone has a pension or someone has a 401k or some other type of thrift savings plan or other savings plan through their employer that is managed by a company, then the QDRO or Qualified Domestic Relations Order is a separate order that divides that out. So if the divorce decree, because the divorce decree itself awards assets to the parties. So if, say, husband has a 401k and the divorce decree awarded wife $100,000 of husband's 401k, you would need then to create or draft a QDRO that is an order, a separate order from the divorce decree that gets signed by the judge. And that order orders the plan administrator to separate, in this scenario, wife's portion of the 401k out. And that's how she would receive her money, is via the QDRO.
Okay, this is how little I knew. I did not even know that QDRO was an order. I thought it was an asset. So a QDRO is an order that anyone is going to hear this term and have this if there are, and tell me if I'm missing anything, pensions, 401ks, savings plans, retirement plans. Is there anything else?
Well, you wouldn't use a QDRO in division of a savings plan. You
Oh,
would use it in dividing multiple types of retirements. Okay, so
okay, so this
401k
is
type
for
requirements, so
money that
forth.
really can't be touched, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So this is and the QDRO will actually accomplish, for example, if I go back to my scenario where we're wife's to receive $100,000. The QDRO would go to, let's say the plan administrator in that scenario is Charles Schwab. It would go out to Charles Schwab. They would receive it. They would review it. And actually, it's called we call it Qualified Domestic Relations Order. The order actually is a domestic relations order. It becomes a Qualified Domestic Relations Order when the plan administrator receives it and accepts it. They qualify it. Now it's a Qualified Domestic Relations Order. They then follow the instructions of that order. So, for example, if the QDRO says that, hey, mom's to receive $100,000 from this account as of, say, the date of divorce, which was whatever date, maybe 2-3 months before, then the plan administrator will go back in time to that time period as if the money were moved. They create a new account in wife's name under the scenario I'm giving you. And then they would actually move that money over together with any if the QDRO says with any interest gains or losses, then from that time that the date evaluation is to the time that they actually move the money over to hers, she would be entitled to that. Unless it says she's not entitled to it, then there's a whole way that happens. But the long and the short of it is they then move the money over to an account now solely in her name. Now, what she does with it after that is up to her, because now the money is still at the same plan administrator, but in an account, totally new account number in her name, and she can leave it there, she can cash it out, or she can talk to her own financial advisor, which is what I
Roll
have
it over.
proposed, and roll it over, correct?
Okay. All right. So now this makes sense. So basically, the reason you need a QDRO is for tax purposes because they don't want to take any money out and risk tax penalties or anything. So what Wade is saying is they just open a new account. It's all done by the firm where the plan is, or the company, or the government, or whoever has the plan. They get an order for the QDRO, they receive it, they divide the money up, and then you can then it's your money. If you're the wife, it's your
Correct.
money. And then you can do what you can always do in a retirement plan or a pension plan. You can cash it in with a penalty. You can, if you're 59 and a half, start taking out stuff, right? Take out
Correct.
it, or you can keep it there, or you can roll it over to a new account without any tax penalties if you get a new financial advisor.
Correct. Now, there is one caveat. A lot, and when I say a lot, I would say probably the majority, 60 to 80% of plan administrators will, if you're receiving the money via a QDRO because of a divorce, they will sometimes allow a one-time withdrawal with no penalty. You still owe the taxes, but a lot of them will let you do a one-time withdrawal, and you can avoid, even if you're under 59 and a half. So,
Interesting. Did not know that.
yeah.
All right,
So,
let's get into the actual process. So it's a multi-step process. It involves determining what the assets are, drafting the QDRO, seeking pre-approval from the plan administrator, and then getting
sometimes, yes.
approval. I'm just reading off an article that was written by you, Wade, I think, on the
Probably.
Girl Smiling website. Okay, so tell me, like, how does this work? Now, I know you can only speak for the state of Texas, but let's broaden it and say, like your answer, here's what happens in the state of Texas, but most states are like this. Can you give me an answer, something like that?
QDROs are generally actually.
You
So right. So it doesn't matter if you get divorced in Texas or you get divorced in Florida, California, Alaska, wherever, they're all going to require a QDRO. And those plan administrators like Fidelity, Charles Schwab, so forth and so on, their QDROs are going to be the same no matter where you got divorced. So they're going to require the same format from a Texas divorce as from a California divorce, as from a New York divorce, as so forth and so on. So and the reason being is that you have to understand that QDROs come from the federal regulations on retirements. So they're complying with actual federal regulations. So they're kind of uniform. They're not uniform as everybody has the same QDRO, but they're uniform as in
the federal
if
government.
correct. So they
Okay.
have to meet certain qualifications.
All right.
So
Now,
I did want to say one thing you talked about. We were talking about 401ks. If you were to have, say, a pension, so you still have to have a QDRO to divide a pension. Okay, so if you are awarded a portion, which is usually a percentage of your spouse's pension, the QDRO would get sent to the plan administrator. They'll approve it, but unless that participant, when I say participant, I mean the person who's the actual employee that has the pension, the person who's the other spouse is what we call the alternate payee. So the participant, if they're already in pay status, meaning they're already receiving their pension, then the alternate pay is going to immediately start receiving theirs. If the participant is not in pay status, then the alternate pay is not going to get any money. Unlike the 401k, the 401k, you're going to get your money right away. The pension, you're going to have to wait till that participant retires and starts collecting a check, and they will send your check to you at that point. So depending on how close they are to retirement, you might have to wait a while to get that money.
You're listening to the Divorce Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. I'm here today with divorce attorney Wade Griffin. Excuse me, we'll edit that part out. I'm here today with divorce attorney Wade Griffin, who is a partner with Texas-based Varghese Somerset. He's been an attorney for 25 years, and Wade and I are talking about the QDRO process. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to get into how these retirement funds and these pensions and 401ks, how it is determined how much you get, and then drafting the QDRO, and then some common mistakes that people make. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Divorce Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Are you wondering what a QDRO is? Have you heard the term and you just don't even understand anything? Well, if you're listening to this podcast today, you're going to find out. This is your go-to guide. And I am here today with Wade Griffin, divorce attorney and partner with Varghese Somerset. And Wade and I are talking about QDROs. So Wade, now this is the part you're going to say, well, I can only speak for Texas. How is it determined? Because I know Illinois is 50-50 of all assets. Is that true for things that belong in the QDRO? Is it 50-50? Is Texas different? Tell me a little bit about some of the guidelines.
So that's an excellent question. So in Texas, while most divorces are divided 50-50, meaning the total assets of the estate are divided 50-50 or close to 50-50, the law in Texas actually says that the court shall divide the marital estate in a just and right manner. Now, I didn't say equal manner. I didn't say equitable manner. I said a just and right manner. So that's discretionary in Texas by the court system. Oftentimes a QDRO, when you're dividing that retirement plan, it may be that you divide that retirement plan 50-50, especially in cases of pension. However, oftentimes I will use the 401k, especially if there's a large amount in a 401k, to equalize the rest of the estate. So it may be that one spouse is keeping the house and keeping some other asset or savings account or something like that. And then the QDRO, the 401k is big enough that, hey, I don't need to split it in half because that spouse is keeping the house, which has a certain amount of asset or monetary value to it. And so by this spouse keeping the house and this spouse keeping the 401k, we're a little upside down here. The house is worth, say, equity, 150,000, 401k is worth 200,000. Well, okay, so I got one side getting 200 grand. I got another side getting 150 grand. I don't need to divide the 401k in half. I just need to move 25,000 over. So now they're both at 175 in the long run. But there again, there's where you're going to use the QDRO to accomplish that, to get that 25,000. But remember, the QDRO is just an administrative tool that the court uses to accomplish what your divorce decree says. So the QDRO has to match whatever the divorce decree says as far as division of that particular asset.
All right. Now, what I would like to know is that just first of all, if every lawyer does this, or if you do it, or both, do you try to avoid the QDRO if you can? Like, would it be easier? Is it easier and better to take the assets out of somewhere else so that you don't have to do the QDRO if you don't have to?
Absolutely. Remember, a QDRO is an added expense. A lot of lawyers farm out their QDROs. Okay, so that means that maybe that attorney in their divorce practice is like they use a QDRO specialist, okay, to draft their QDROs, and then that specialist sends it back to them, And then they get it entered and they send it back to the specialist, and the specialist then sends it off to plan administrator, make sure it gets qualified.
Just because it's
Um,
so complex that some attorneys, it might be over their head. But I just want
correct.
my listeners, it's not over Wade's head. He does these.
I'm actually yes, here at my
Quadro
firm, me,
specialist.
yes, I am a quadro specialist. I've been in them a long time. So actually a lot of it, we actually get most of our quadros from other attorneys.
Okay.
We do our own in-house, but we also get a lot from other attorneys asking us to do the quadros for their cases. So
So because it's so complex and because like you said, if it's a pension, you may have to wait a few years or several years to get it. It would be a better decision, in my opinion, if I was a wife, to take the cash now from somewhere else and not wait for the pension.
yes. And like you said, sometimes like I've had cases where we have multiple retirements. Maybe wife has had 3 jobs and she has 3 different 401ks, and husband has multiple. And so, gosh, that's a lot of quadros to have to draft. Well, like I described earlier, we take the estate as a whole and try to figure out, hey, if I can get away with drafting one quadro, you keep all these over here, you keep all this over here, and we'll use this one quadro that's the biggest one to kind of equalize things. So now I only have to draft one quadro instead of say 5.
Right. Just much simpler.
Yes. And what you said about the cash, yes, sometimes that is true. Sometimes taking that cash up front, if like you said, if you're the wife, is the better way to go. But you have to also think about sometimes that pension can be worth a lot of, do I have to wait a few years? Yes, but am I going to get $1,000 or $1,200 for the rest of my life? That's something you got to think about too. So sometimes that pension can be worth a lot of money.
Who can help you with those decisions? I know a divorce attorney, you can give your opinion, but you're looking at it more from the legal perspective. Do you
Yes,
think
ma'am.
it makes sense to talk to a financial advisor, a CDFA? He's nodding his head for people who can't.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I strongly encourage clients to talk to a financial advisor. A lot of people think, well, as soon as divorce is over, I need to go talk to a financial advisor to get my affairs in order. No, let's start talking to that financial advisor now, before the divorce is over, before we go to mediation. Let's
right at
once
the
we
beginning of the divorce.
yes, and then let's get all the finances once we exchange inventories and we have all the statements. Let's turn all that over to the financial advisor. They're going to look at it and then talk to your client and give them good advice. I've had financial advisors who actually will go to mediation and we invite the financial, no, please come. Come be a part of the mediation to advise the client on what's best for them, given their goals. And the nice thing about it is most of those, some of them will charge a fee, but some of them won't. Some of them will, because what they're hopeful for is that person will then hand all the money over to them to
Yes.
manage and take care of. So, a lot of them will do it. I know a few that'll do it for, I won't charge them a dime. I'll be in from the get-go because in the end, their goal is to be their financial advisor.
Well, I can't resist. I have to do it. I have to shout out a name of a financial advisor who can help you with this. Their names are Pete Mullins and Elaine Moss. Pete is a CDFA. They're partners. They specialize in divorce. They are my financial advisors. I've been with them for 8 years. And they are wonderful at exactly what Wade is saying. So you can find Vester Capital in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling if you're interested. All right, moving on to mistakes. What are some common mistakes that happen in a quadro process?
So the most common mistakes that we see and we literally do probably I have a particular person who does all my quadros, and I'm gonna brag on her just a little bit. Her name is Sarah Griffin. The last name is familiar, same as mine, because she happens to be my wife. And she's been doing quadros with me for the last, oh gosh, 16 years.
Okay.
And she actually drafts them. She's made so many contacts with let's put it this way, we do so many quadros, Fidelity actually assigned, usually you have to submit everything electronically. They won't call you. We did so many that they contacted us and said, okay, you send us so many quadros, we're assigning this person to Sarah. She can call anytime she wants. So we kind of have an end out because we do so many. So, but I got
Now this
sidetracked. I'm
makes a lot
sorry.
of
The
sense.
mistakes, we were going to talk about
I
mistakes.
know, but I was going to say now I understand why Melody connected us to do this podcast. You are the Quadro guy. You and your wife are the
Yes,
Quadro people.
we do a lot.
Okay.
So
All right. So
anyway,
mistakes.
so mistakes. The biggest mistakes we see aren't generally with the quadros. The biggest mistakes we see are with the drafting of the decree. Because remember, the quadro, like I said, is an administrative tool that is there to accomplish the award of the asset that was awarded to you in the divorce decree. So we have to, whatever you put in that divorce decree, or your attorney put in that divorce decree, we have to draft a quadro in conformity with that. It has to match. So the problem is, the biggest problems we see or mistakes we see is poor drafting in the divorce decree itself. We've occasionally had to call up attorneys who have hired us to do their quadro and say, hey, you know what? We're gonna have to get creative here because the way you put it in the divorce decree, it can't be accomplished. Or it can't be computed by a plan administrator and they're never going to qualify it. We've actually had a couple of times where we've had to have the attorneys go back to court and get it amended, which is not, it's hard to do. If you're within the 30 days in Texas, if you're within the 30 days of when the divorce decree was entered, you can get it amended. If you're past the 30 days, you can't get it amended. You end up having to clarify it instead, to clarify what you meant by it. But that's the biggest mistake. And it's not the quadro side of things, it's the drafting of the divorce decree. So I have a few attorneys that actually will, in drafting their divorce decree, they say, hey, we've already settled this case, but I want to make sure, I want you to look at my language on this particular thing to make sure that this is going to work when you draft a quadro. And that's very, very helpful. Because we
Now,
can look
wait.
at it and say, okay, change this wording to this, and that'll be good.
Now, can you help attorneys in other states with quadros or just Texas?
I'm not licensed in other states, so I can help them with the wording of and what I was just talking about. If you're talking about actually drafting quadros, yes. So if you've done a divorce in another state and you need a quadro drafted, it can be sent to us most of the time, and we can create your quadro for you, and we can
Great. So
send
if
it
there's
back
a
to you, get it entered.
listening, this is a great resource for them.
Yes. So I can't help them with drafting of their decree like I was just mentioning, but I could help them with, if they need a quadro done, most of the time we can get it done.
In any state.
Yes, most of the time. Yeah.
Okay, last question. Under the mistakes in this article, it said that sometimes a quadro isn't filed quickly enough.
That is very true.
And what is that? When do you file it? And what happens if you don't file it quickly enough?
Ideally, you would want to try and get that quadro entered with the court within the first 30 days from the date of divorce. In a perfect world, you'd get the divorce decree signed and the quadro signed simultaneously, but that rarely happens. But if you can get it done within the first 30 days, that's great. The problem comes is when we have people come in and they've waited years. I mean, I've literally had people come in and they're like, hey, I need a quadro, and we're looking at the divorce decree, and the divorce decree is 20 years old. They've waited 20 years to enter it. The problem occurs when you don't get it entered quickly enough. Even a year or two could be very dangerous. So let's go back to my original example.
Okay.
Wife, we'll
I'm gonna
just say
say it
wife.
just opens up a whole can of worms if you
It
go
does.
when.
Because
Mhm.
so let's say that they do a quadro, I mean, they do in the divorce decree, wife's awarded, instead of a dollar amount, they say 50% of husband's 401k. As of the date of divorce, which was, let's go with December 1st 2005. Okay, so gosh, almost 20 years, 19 years ago, right? What ends up happening, did I do my math right? Or 9 years ago? I don't know. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
Well, what happens is we end up doing the QDRO, we send it out to the plan administrator. Problem is it's a different plan administrator. These companies don't stay with the same plan administrator forever. You may be working for a big company, and right now, all their 401ks are managed by Charles Schwab. Well, 5 years from now, they get a better deal with Fidelity, so they switch over to Fidelity. Maybe 10 years later, they switch over to somebody else. Okay.
So now there's no records of what it
There
was.
you go. Yes, ma'am. So 50%, and you send it to plan administrator, and they go, I'm sorry, our records don't go back that far. And the
Right.
previous plan administrator, they don't have those records anymore. So how do you determine how much they are? So now you're stuck going back to court to clarify the order and hopefully those records are still around. You see what I'm saying? So you can run into a real problem.
Wow, this is such great information. Wade, thank you so much for taking time to do this. What a great
Sure.
conversation. Sorry, that was kind of awkward because the
Sorry.
dog was barking. All right, let's do that again. We'll edit that part out.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just start over. So, Wade, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to do this. This was a wonderful conversation. I know I learned a ton, and I hope my listeners did too.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And to my listeners, if you liked what you heard and you're interested in consulting with Wade, he can be found on the Varghese Somerset website. And the Varghese Somerset firm can also be found on Divorced Girl Smiling in the Trusted Professional section. And if you want to listen to more podcasts or read articles or download my mobile app or sign up for my free consult, you can come see me at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you real soon.